Okay, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever your time zone happens to be. I think we've given up. I think New South and Vic becoming and Tassie get aligned back with Queensland this weekend.
Yeah,
Uh, that'd be nice. There we go, Fiji. So absolutely good. Is it good morning or is it good yesterday? I can never remember. So welcome everyone. Wow, what a huge participant list for this one. So I guess this one really is a hot topic. So I think we all know why we're here. This is following our the hot topic um, selection where we were talking about academic integrity and assessment redesign. And to keep going, and on that, we're without our fearless ACODE leader today, Kate, as she's riding the high seas on a boat off Brisbane somewhere, for a great big cruise ship, I think. So, and I have to say, I've come back from having I got a 5 days leave in New Zealand, which was fantastic, driving around New Zealand, partaking in all the Whittaker's chocolate I couldn't bring back with me. I did bring giant bags back for my staff, and they were gone within the first morning. So what happens? Okay, so I think we've got. Oh, we're still getting people joining, but we better kick off. So uh, thanks everyone. Starting with an acknowledgement of country. Um, so I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people from the University of Melbourne. Pay respects to elders past and present and emerging. Please feel free to acknowledge your own countries for those, if you will. And Steve, can I pass to you for our New Zealand equivalent?
certainly can do. So I'll give a karakia for all the Kiwi participants. Whakataka ki te ora, whakataka ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, ehi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, ti he moriora.
Thanks, Steve. So I might kick off. So we don't have a Padlet for this session today. What I was thinking though is if we could get some questions through the conversation of what might be good questions and responses to share amongst ourselves in this domain, that we could put together a bit of a questionnaire and a survey across all of us to try and build up a bit of a snapshot across us all, because I think we'd all really welcome to actually understand what's happening in our spaces. And to that end, I thought I'd just start off today with sharing what. So at the University of Melbourne, around academic integrity, this might be of interest to you all, and I've just put that into the chat there. So I won't share screen, so I can see everyone. Um, but at the University of Melbourne, we in academic integrity, we just went for a massive change review last year, and have changed our policy and have changed our processes and have done so fundamentally. So that website that's there, the nice thing at Melbourne is we do tend to overshare. So you should be able to all get our policy actually there as a matter of public record on what's changed there. And actually, it takes you through what has changed here. And I'm very mindful we were catching up to a lot of you. We're catching up, especially to the more agile, smaller institutions. Um, and I think it's fair to say, Melbourne relies on its sandstone and its ivy a little too much sometimes, and sort of catching up in this space. And so, what fundamentally, from a policy point of view, is the policy is called up to recognize a bit of a newer world. So traditionally, our academic integrity was very much a local faculty-led. Students would be issues would be raised by academics and instructional staff locally, and that would be pretty much held within a local committee structure within the faculties, and then that would progress. And stop me where this sounds familiar. That, of course, has led to we have massive discrepancy across the institution as to, in some subjects or with some subject coordinators, what would be allowed in some subjects would actually be the status of misconduct in another. And that wasn't because really some subject and discipline requirements do have that difference, that's where it's appropriate. But for us, it was more practice. It was more the personal position of the individual academics. And of course, that's just not equitable or fair for our students. So it's that equity and fairness and the transparency and confusion from our student body has very much led to this change, along with recognition, of course, of, you knew the other AI was going to get thrown in there. What have we hit? Minute 5 of artificial intelligence and what that means around academic integrity. So we are moving now to a two-tier model where the faculties will still deal with lower tier of what we're dubbing poor academic practice. So this is where it's more of an educational response. So potentially say the students have not cited correctly, or where collaboration has slipped into collusion under the definitions, those kind of things. But where it's to be dealt with as more of as a poor academic practice model. And then there's the second tier, which is the misconduct practice, where we suspect, the definitions of contract cheating, collusion, those kind of things, outsourced assessment work, shall we say, following the research. So that broader definition of just contract cheating for money, but that very much, and again, I'm sure we share practice where a lot of that is family and friends and past papers, those kind of things, is actually a bulk of the shared of that kind of practice. But something we're doing a little different, and this sort of can start to open up the conversation, hopefully, is mindful of quite a number of us have set up central investigation units around academic integrity. And we've gone we've gone down that way, but we've separated it as well. So with it, how we're resourcing this is we've established a new Office of Student Academic Integrity. It's part of the broader Student Misconduct Office, but it is focused on academic integrity. They are the case managers. So the requests for those for academic integrity investigations goes to that group. And that is a separate group under our Deputy Registrar. So it all exists very much under the Registrar as our Chief Student Officer, and the idea that this is a student affair. And what we've done, which I feel is a little different, is the actual the investigation of we've placed the investigation of data from our educational technologies and others and other sources actually within my team, as I look after all the educational technologies and the digital learning environments in Melbourne. We've set up an academic integrity and learning analytics unit within the team, with the idea that academic integrity is a subset of learning and academic analytics. And so the metaphor I'm using is that team led by Kat Manning, who I'm sure many of you know or have met over the years. So Kat has moved sideways in Melbourne, and she's taken on the management role of this new team, which is fantastic news for me. And what we're doing is, we're kind of the CSI. We're the crime scene investigators for the case managers and the police unit, if you will. So we kind of separate, which is nice. And so that's sort of in Melbourne, the new process, the new policy structure. It's absolutely brand new. We're exploring this. We've learned from many of you, so particularly like from the Academic Integrity Network, which if anyone's not a member, should absolutely jump on. It is got to be one of the most annoyingly verbose email lists if you are on it, but it's there's some fantastic conversations happening there. Um, and we're looking at replicating our own versions of some of the work. So I think many of us through Texa or other forums would have seen, like Macquarie's Wiro tool and other such things. So looking at that tool base and that evidence pack creation in terms of that. Um, so yeah, that's just sort of set the scene. That's sort of the big changes at Melbourne. And just sort of did anyone else want to sort of start off the comparative conversation or raise any questions that they're seeking from this big giant group of now 90 people? Or have I dulled you all into
Pat, I should have put my digital hand up, but I'll just jump in. I'm really curious about the learning analytics work in the academic integrity investigations because, as we know in the past, learning analytics was a thing, then it got subsumed kind of under the whole big enterprise data work and data analytics. So I'm curious to see how Melbourne is approaching it as two distinct pieces, or are they only by name, but they're actually part of the larger data piece?
it's it's a great question right now. It's part of the larger data piece, and the idea is to not just treat academic integrity as a police action or as a misconduct process, but to acknowledge the need to massively review our assessment design. And that's the other part of this so the idea is to have the learning analytics. It's part of learning analytics as part of looking at both, yes, here's the investigative path for poor academic practice or misconduct investigations, but also to review these are our assessment structures or assessment designs which lend themselves to integrity issues. How do we help resolve that? So it is very much a whole picture attempt to try and inform learning design and assessment design and start to build away from those common channels where we know integrity is an issue. So of course, the elephant in the room is essays and long form writing and how to maintain the pedagogies around those, but to start to look towards um, the learning design, but also the educational technology deployment and affordances for restructure. So I hope that situates why we've pulled it together.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
We've got some brilliant discussions in the
Yeah.
chat, Patrick.
Might start with, I know there's a few there beforehand. So we've got if everyone could think about, there's a thread there going on about mandatory training and inclusion and whether or not you have mandatory training for your student body, but also mandatory training for staff. And I think that's an important delineation. Um, I think another one was there's a thread going on about the detectors, which is a whole other, like that could be a whole series of workshops in and of itself at the moment. Um, but I wanted to I might just jump on Stephen Marshall's question here of how many institutions are exploring the two-lane approach um, as part of assessment redesign and dealing with academic integrity. So I can see ACU's jumped on, say two-lane, UOA's two-lane. We know Sydney, of course, is two-lane. Melbourne is about to go two-lane. Um, so if everyone wanted to again, these are fantastic questions. I think we'll put in the survey. Just
It'd be
ask.
really useful to, the fact that you've just rattled off the unis you have rattled off, Patrick, is actually really useful for me in having some conversations with our leadership team, because I mean, senior leadership teams go where the others are gone. And if I start rattling off high status Australian universities as saying that approach is legitimate, they start feeling like, oh, okay, that's not Stephen going crazy in the corner there again. So I mean, it is persuasive.
Thanks, Stephen. And Liz, Liz Sitko, I saw you had your hand up. Was that saying you're going two lane or you wanted to jump in?
That was just a two-lane thing, yeah.
Terrific. See, Amy's jumped in to say QUT's looking, Fed's looking. So yeah, it seems to be that we're a bit of a growing consensus approach to either jumping in feet first or exploring the two-lane approaches. I think there's some interesting debate around that as well. I think in a lot of the conferences, we've been talking about. So some universities are talking about multi-lane approaches. So I might throw UNSW under the bus here, where they were talking about potentially 5 lanes, I think it was. But the reality was, I think a lot of the commentary was most of those are actually sub-definitions of what would be lane 1 or lane 2 approaches. Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not helped by the fact that Sydney seems to have redefined what they mean by 2 lanes. At one point, they were talking about it's either AI permissive or not AI permissive, and that was the end of the conversation. I think they're now much clearer that it's actually about program structure and how you position high intensity, high effort, high engagement assessments in a programmatic view of what you're trying to achieve. And to me, that seems both more defensible as a rationale for how we might come at this whole issue of academic integrity within a broader structure of what we're trying to achieve with our students, but then also really introduces some very significant complications, because if you're putting in the high impact assessments in certain points of the program, it's implicit that you are at that point stopping a student proceeding until they resolve why it is they haven't been able to pass that point. So it does mean that programmatically, those have to be really strongly scaffolded, heavily supported, and there's got to be resit opportunities and recovery opportunities that don't materially damage the university's progress and retention and completion statistics. So I mean, that's part of why I'm interested in who else is engaging with this, because I think as much as it's a complicated programming conversation with our faculties, it's also quite a complicated policy and student success conversation with the broader university community.
I think, again, we've seen some of the conversation around that changing to around academic integrity, the ability to resource all of our assessment to ensure integrity. And that's become a bit of a validity argument. I don't know if people have heard that term bouncing around the conferences and the traps, and that idea of what assessment. So over a course or program, do you start to choose what assessment pieces are worth the validity you need the validity on to assure learning attainment or validation of learning for our accreditation bodies and externals. And that's a bit of a debate I know a few universities are having, whether or not people have considered that. And I know, for instance, for us, that's a conversation of that not just being at a program, as we've traditionally talked about, program level assessments such as gateways and capstones, but more of that threshold concept of, and do you put validity around academic integrity of your assessments at those key threshold concept assessment pieces that you need as that progression. But as you said, Stephen, how do we assure progression moving for the students through that process? Gordon.
I'll just put in the chat, actually, Pat, an article that was actually published by Guy Curtis about the approach of the 2 lane was absurd. That was his language, actually, in in the journal article that he put out. But he argued for a middle lane, so I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe the New South Wales approach might be in order in terms of looking at it more closely. So being a binary.
Guy was responding to the first version of two lanes from Sydney when I read his article.
Yeah.
I think where he landed was an argument in favour of the one that they've iterated towards in Sydney in the end, with some provisos that I don't think some of his ideas around controlling the presence of AI are realistic. And I know Danny's been really quite strong in advising us to not pretend that we can somehow know when AI is being used or not being used, and controlling it absolutely, and not then consequently creating a real integrity dilemma for our students and for our institutions in a really unhelpful way.
Yeah, I might just add to that how people are considering the student feedback, or whether you have channels for your students to give feedback around, are they clear or is there confusion around allowed use of AI or other assistance in assessment design? So I know some people, a few people here have asked us for our, I think we showed in a previous TEL talk, Melbourne's introduced the declarations of AI use by students in their assessment, but also by staff in how they provide their feedback and marking of assessment via a H5P declaration and a tool within the assessment submission workflow. But part of that is also trying to do a broader definition of, when you're doing your references, having the students also include acknowledgements, trying to look at academic writing, the idea of, but you should include AI, but include it as part of the general acknowledgements, where you're acknowledging input from your teachers, your tutors, other people, your group, and AI would be part of that. So trying to normalize AI as part of that. So just a couple of thought bubbles there of that, if that's of use to anyone. Joanne.
I should probably introduce myself because I'm actually new to the group. So I'm based at Fed Uni. I have a number of roles. The two that are probably most important is I'm sitting in a new role called Teaching Champion. And the second one is that I'm one of the co-chairs of our upper level academic misconduct committee. So there's sort of 3 strikes and you're out type stuff. So that we're actually taking, I'd like to think of it as a philosophical approach. So we've actually thinking about what we're doing, and we're lucky, we're small, we're agile, but we also have one huge, we're small, we're agile. We're in the process of going to a cooperative based work integrated learning model across all of our courses. So we're in a state of massive change already. So that they are advantageous things. We also have a totally online cohort and have taught online traditionally for 80 plus years. So we've got students that never come on campus. So we have to deal with that at asynchronous online. We're looking at this as assurance of learning. And that's our underlying philosophy across everything we're doing in this space. How do we assure that students learn? And at a university level, there's a whole heap of different trials going on in different places to try different ways that might work out in this space. So generative AI is a tool. It's a tool that our students are going to use. It's a tool that we're going to use. It's a tool for some of them that makes them highly employable. And so lock out of generative AI is not one of the things that's really on the table. It's very hard to describe what's going on, except that assess messy might be a really nice way of thinking of what's happening in our space in terms of assessing within tutorials, assessing the process, not the product, a whole heap of different things. I do admit most of our more interesting stuff is going on in the STEM places at the moment, rather than in our more humanities and essay driven sorts of spaces. So we just keep coming back to this philosophy of how can we best assure or ensure or provide assurance that the students are learning something. And for us, that is a mix of face-to-face and oral examinations, doing things within tutorial spaces, all sorts of stuff. At the moment, the other part of my hat is I'm an assessment researcher. So my area is assessment, and I'm busy having a huge deep dive into programmatic assessment for an engineering degree at the moment. So do we actually have to assess every single, do we have to lock down every single unit that we teach? What are the skills that we actually have to assure? So that's sort of where we're sitting at the moment. That's probably enough for the moment.
Perfect. Thanks, Joanne. If I could, I might try and hook off that start there. And I know Nigel had raised a request to sort of ask across everyone at one end of the spectrum of that in terms of the assurance of learning and online cohorts in particular. Nigel, you'd raised wanted to know how people were looking at online proctoring and those kind of solutions in the space. Did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Sorry I was late to this. Zoom decided it wasn't going to play with me, so I had to find another machine to join on. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I had a couple of questions, and one, as you say, Patrick, was that, what are the current approaches to online invigilation that people are taking, whether those are students who are fully online, but, a lot of assessments are taking place online. And during the, first couple of years of COVID, I know that people were looking at online proctoring. We had an internal white paper where we recommended that we didn't go down that path. We thought there was quite a risk to the university's reputation, particularly round about the way that online proctoring was very white Western centered. And also in terms of accessibility or how it dealt with students who might not come across as what it termed to be normal. However, it's a question that's starting to come up again, and so that's, I suppose, why I raised it at the business meeting. So I'm definitely interested to have an understanding of what people are doing in that space now.
So maybe as a start with a quick call of digital hands, how many people have online proctoring solutions currently deployed at their institutions? I think Stephen Marshall, and so I think Vic at Welly and Melbourne might be outliers here with not having.
Yeah, and I think it's the nuances there, because I noticed that Carl's put up his hand for Auckland, but I think they're using Inspira with local university employed proctors rather than what I think is sort of the original sense of online proctoring. So I think the nuance here is important. I think there's a big difference between random Indian call center with respect to the Indian subcontinent, people randomly doing proctoring through some sort of AI mediated thing through to actually employed university invigilators able to proctor through a vendor tool. I think those are three very, very different scenarios.
Stephen, I'll say from the University of Auckland, it's also not easily accessible to all academic staff, so they have to put in a solid argument for the reasons why we would actually go to that level of assurance.
Quite expensive.
Yeah. I think, I mean, definitely we should all, we'll include in a survey a bit of some of these questions to pull that out, because with Steve and I know we talking about online proctoring for new fully online for us, and what that would mean. And then I can see there's a couple of posts there of people using lockdown browsers, which I've presented on that we do here at Melbourne, lockdown browsers in invigilated venues, but we're now looking at how do we do the proctoring, but tying that very much back to, as Joanne was saying, and I was saying earlier, that the idea of what's learning assurance, those kind of things. I was Trev, I don't know if that was just your hand up saying you've got proctoring, right? Okay, so I think that's one definitely looking at that spectrum of how we're doing, are we matching our proctoring with our integrity? Would it be worth also asking around that, is proctoring looked at in terms of the broader integrity policies, or is it more a solution to online delivery?
I'm Gopi Chattopadhyay from Federation University. I run this postgraduate courses in maintenance and reliability engineering. Those are done totally online by managers, engineers working in different parts of the country and world. What we have done, I think, change the focus to more the learning side and what they do with the learning. That means the assignments are designed with the context of their own organization. So each student coming from different industry background, they're coming with their problems. And the learning is based on that. That has reduced to some extent because we encourage that. Yes, their companies are also telling they'll have to use AI in terms of, what are the options and quickly preparing some of the reports or some of the tendering, all these things, but where they differentiate, where they add value and solve those problems. So we also have this assessment based, and also the final one is that they'll have to present something. What is the learning, like an interactive style. So that has reduced to some extent, but we are interested to know what can be the silver bullet. And it requires lots of resources, because some cases, even for going through that, educating them as a continual improvement tool, it took nearly 6 to 8 hours of the sessional stuff, and then how we fund those things. Always, whatever we are trying to do, it requires this investment, resources, and workloading. So I need to address that one, because that is also part of the solution. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, Patrick, that was an interesting comment and some questions around with the growing need for to look after this stuff. What's the cost, and are there processes that are more efficient than others, and it's only going to get more expensive, right?
Yeah, so for anyone who's at FITA, I actually have a presentation talking about this, and I'll be given a bit of a warts and all on what our costs are of our new move to digital assessment. But it's yes, it's very much to sort of share quite quickly there, a rapid movement of cost to the center. So again, I had to stand up a whole new team to look after digital assessment. And that was the move where we do that as a shared services model now with the exams and graduations team, who historically ran the exams events. So for those who don't know, Melbourne runs 95 to 100,000 exam sittings every semester. We hire the Royal Exhibition Building here in Melbourne for 3 weeks, and we have basically 3,500, 4,000 students at a sitting twice or three times a day to get through that, and that includes about 5,000 adjustment plans. All of that is centrally coordinated as an event, and we have now a new team to actually help with the shift towards digital assessment. So about 40 to 45% of at the moment has shifted from paper to BYO digital in the venue, looking at it's using Lockdown Browser at the moment, but how do we move forward? And again, a question around assessment redesign. We look into how do we move away from quizzes and long form essays to also include advanced or more authentic assessment, such as scenarios in advanced Excel for actuarial or mathematics, MATLAB, R. So we have testing of all of that at the moment, but how do we do that? How do we support that as central teaching and learning and assessment officers? And that's been, as I said, that's been a big shift of costs centrally. We've actually saved our faculties a lot of money, but they've happily already rediverted from what were old processes dealing with assessment now that we've taken it on centrally, but we need to push it. We need to push back now to say we can't just take on the millions we've done centrally. We need to balance that. And again, I am totally aware that the privilege I have as being University of Melbourne, and that we're able to create teams and move, frankly, millions of dollars around to facilitate this, and that is, frankly, a luxury. So obviously trying to do it efficiently and effectively, but I am mindful we're in a privileged position there as well. So, Sina, sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with some of the conversation. So we've talked about I might pick up on Amy's there because that was a question as well. So we've sort of had that spectrum of online. What are people doing around hybrid assessments and your integrity around those cohorts? Nope. No one wants to go first? Does anyone have those cohorts?
I'll make a comment on behalf of us. This is a problem. This is the hugest problem that we have, is dealing with online cohorts, and how you would have heard Gopi just before with his postgraduate engineers. How do we deal with that? There isn't a nice answer. We've been trying lots of different things. And in fact, in the pre-Fed days, we used to get our students to come in. All of our online students came in for exams, or we had a huge system of online exam venues across the state where we would send people in for an invigilated exam, or they would be privately invigilated. I had a student sit an exam on a plane once, flying to Europe to go and compete in the Olympics. So the problem is those systems have become increasingly more expensive. And so for us, it's a real philosophical redesign about where do we actually need to have that level of invigilation? Does it have to be everywhere? Do we have to do it on every course? Because the cost of doing that and the difficulty of doing it, I'm a mathematician. Mathematics is notoriously difficult to do digitally. And so it's not an easy space to shift to a digital exam. No, we don't have answers. We have lots of things that we're trying, but we have discovered that proctoring, online proctoring is not a great tool for us in that space, and that's because of the nature of our online students, and it's largely a tech issue or an access issue or a bandwidth issue. They're in places where they've got really poor internet. So the internet required for video proctoring of exams is ridiculous and difficult to achieve.
Thanks, Joanne. And if I could add to that as well, if people don't think they've got hybrid cohorts, how are we all thinking around dealing with academic integrity and access to assessment as we move increasingly the digital or different digital, with the growing needs for diversity and inclusion and accessibility. So again, sort of food for some thought, we've had a 30 at Melbourne, we've had a 30% growth in students with adjustment plans for exams semester on semester for the last 5 semesters now. And that's before we've even implemented our diversity and inclusion action plan. So just after the pandemic of students coming, and with the shift to digital assessment, the shift to online or hybrid cohorts, the complexities of having to deal with integrity policies or access and inclusion on these digital platforms. So for instance, Responder's lockdown browser plays havoc with accessibility technologies. And so we actually have to turn off the integrity controls for students who have those needs, and they have to be personally invigilated in our special venues where we do that kind of thing. So just as food for thought on some of that. Mulyadi, I'm sorry if I'm going to
No,
mispronounce
mate,
your
that's
name. Is it
fine,
Mulyadi?
Patrick. It is Mulyadi. Hi, everyone from the Australian Institute of Business. I've only been to this one of these meetings once. Liz did forward me this link. So given we are fully online, we've been fully online for quite some time, but very similar to Joanne's experience. I think pre me coming on board, before we moved online, we had students coming in doing exams monthly. Coming in all the way from all across Australia to Adelaide and doing this. Given we're online, we are our main program that students undertake is the MBA. We're Australia's largest online MBA provider. We've got the majority of our students are Australian domestic students as well, very different from sort of my previous roles at places like Monash and Melbourne Uni. Sort of one of the challenges that we face with online assessments, obviously, is we've got authentic assessments built in. Students do bring in their own experiences with the rise of Gen AI, specifically ChatGPT. We've had to do quite a lot of monitoring. So we started off with one academic integrity officer who was an academic. We've got 1,500 students each term, but unlike other places, we've got 6 full terms a year. So it's back to back, and the workload's been immense. We've now got basically the academic integrity approach is educative, but we start with the markers. So our OLFs, online learning facilitators, they will flag. And then we've got an investigative process. We've got two specialist staff looking at sort of the first instances. Are there triggers for that? It then gets raised to academics or academic integrity officers who take a look at that, gets escalated to myself and or the academic integrity manager or myself, associate in teaching and learning, and then we pursue that. It is time consuming. We have seen a massive increase in terms of we can't really flag someone for inappropriate use or unethical use of ChatGPT. So our proxies are falsification, fabrication, misattribution. So we also use we develop our own little bots, chat bots to detect sort of misattribution and the like. But one of the tools that one of our academic staff introduced, which has really helped a lot in terms of trying to move us away from assessing the artifacts of learning to the process of learning itself, is to integrate what we call a reference source information. It used to be called the reference list. God, I can't remember what it was. It's a table, and students freaked out. But basically, it's a table where we ask students to identify 5 to 10, depending on the assessment levels, of direct quotes from a paper that they've cited and the rationale as to why they've used that in the assessment. So it's really trying to get into the heart of why have you chosen this article. Now, its operationalization was still, I'd say, still a work in progress, but that's actually prevented, I think, a lot of students from just simply undertaking and using Gen AI tools inappropriately. It has also helped us in terms of detecting fabrication, because Turnitin, the good old Turnitin, not the AI detection, which is, I know this is recorded, so I shouldn't say it's terrible, but it can be terrible. But their plagiarism detector is pretty good. So if the quotes don't come out, we know it's been potentially plagiarized. So it's, that potentially been fabricated. So it's like almost a reverse tool. We are looking at, and I'm pushing for a rethink from our academics to undertake authentic assessment and how that looks like. So it is, we had a number of discussions around authentic assessments. It is useful, it does, but it's, if you're remotely a more than beginner use of tools like ChatGPT, you can pretty much smash out an authentic assessment in context with references very, very easily. So it keeps me up at night. Would love to get ideas or thoughts of how things do.
Thanks, Moyali. Some great concepts there that you've introduced around like assessment and operational redesign. I think a fair few of those have sort of might be shared across us, or people are exploring those. If anyone wanted to jump in there, I think a call out we need to make is market Vic Yu's appeal to assessment integrity and learning attainment and just general, call to arms to remind ourselves that we're supposed to be educators of actually knowing and building relationships with our students. And I think that's whilst we're talking about the operational concepts, the policies here, I think it's an it's a great call out to remind ourselves of in our policies that they're, and I think that's something we've sort of definitely talked about is how do our policies and workflows and processes help to serve, not introduce anxiety, not be accusative, make sure they include transparency and natural justice, but they're seen as academic integrity is part of assessment of learning and learning attainment. And for us, I don't know if anyone else is talking about this, is the actual existential threat to, trying to maintain that balance whilst also recognizing if we can't guarantee attainment or the individual has demonstrated that those learning outcomes, what is the value of our certifications anymore? So, Stephen?
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. It's a challenging opportunity, but I think we have an opportunity because we are being forced through circumstance to finally address the problem that we've allowed assessment in university to become captured by the bit you're just talking about in its totality. And it's become entirely an exercise of how to most cost effectively and efficiently verify a standardized degree product. And we've completely lost the human and the journey that the student has gone through in that conception of what assessment is. And it's not our students only, it's our staff, it's how we design our courses and our programs. We have iteratively collapsed into this accountability exercise rather than really leaning heavily into formative assessment and the way in which we empower our students to have agency and really discover a passion and a desire to be better at doing things that are meaningful to them. And I recognize that's hard, and I recognize that some academic colleagues will get very angry with me because they will believe that they are making that happen. But I would also suggest that the ones that are doing that are privileged to operate in very small scale contexts, either very small postgraduate classrooms or disciplines which are not operating at a very high level of scale. And I would say that in that space, they are at great threat in a university that's operating in a very utilitarian and financially constrained, finance-led crisis mode, which many of us are shifting into. So I think we have an opportunity to engage into this space and to really start powerfully arguing for the design of academic programs in such a way that we're actively and visibly present in a process of learning, and by that providing the level of confidence that we have that students are making individual progress. And it's one of the reasons why so far the best model I've seen is the two-lane approach, in that it does allow us to imagine a world in which we design our programs to operate in that way, while still acknowledging and respecting the fact that we do have to be held to account in terms of being really confident that Stephen Marshall really can write an essay by himself, if that's a skill that we value. And I got into a lot of trouble in a meeting recently where I started suggesting to people that we need to also ask ourselves some hard questions about whether there are skills like that we have valued, that technologies are increasingly telling us we shouldn't perhaps put as much weight into those as we have done. And there's a big argument going on about how much the mechanisms we have used are in fact driving important cognitive changes in our students and learners, versus they're just hopeful black boxes. And people may have seen a cartoon with the student and the professor with the starting position and then the ending position and a big box in the middle that says then a miracle occurs. And I think some of our approaches to assessment feel like that, in that they believe that if we just make students write lots and lots of essays, at some point they get better at writing essays or doing any number of other similar tasks. And I don't think we've had the opportunity or been forced to really assess, first of all, whether that approach is really working, but also whether we're in fact generating an outcome we value. So I think these are important opportunities, but these are going to be hard because the system we're operating under is privileging the ways that we have been doing things because they're cheap and cost effective. Well, they were.
Yeah, I think it also talks to the earlier conversations around validity and do we choose what we have to assess, but the frameworks, are sort of, they suppress that kind of innovation or reflection because we're all sort of trapped by our unit of credit structures with our governments as well, because where's the assessment for the unit of credit? How you assess that unit of credit? And then that's what we paid for. So, our finance modeling of our Commonwealth supported places or our enrollment structures are sort of Weberian, holding in terms of our bureaucracy is locking us in some ways, which is something to consider as well. I'm mindful we're about to run out of time and a couple of people are already having to depart. Gordon, you'd come off mute. Did you want to jump in?
No, sorry. I just wanted to actually get access to that cartoon that Stephen was referring to. I think that sounds like it's gold.
Yeah, no. Does anyone else feel like I talk with our student admin or our IT colleagues, and it's sort of like if I throw ourselves under the bus here, it's sort of in our student and scholarly services area, student admin is like how to get the students and then how to deal with the students once they're alumni. And then there's this little there's the black box in the middle that says, and somehow for the 3-4 years we have them, we educate them and they become educated graduates and, constructive members of society. That just seems to be the big cloud bit in between the onboard and outboard. Did anyone else want to jump in, raise any questions? I'm really hoping that's been a useful conversation. I mean, has anyone else got the feeling we could really put together like a 3-day conference on this?
So actually, on that note, I am contemplating a topic proposal to Steve and Kate for the ACODE workshop at the end of the year before ICDE, and this space was something that I was interested in potentially having as the focus of that topic. It feels like it's going to be an ongoing conversation, so that's a bit later in the year. But what would be, and I'll put that out there as a proposal, as a concept for that. But also, I'd be really keen to have colleagues suggesting provocative thinkers, people they work with who could be part of that workshop, because I keep reminding people as well, the two-lane approach, for example, is just a hypothesis. We've actually got no evidence that that will even work. So I'd really like us to have a range of ideas that we can keep as options and do the sort of futures thing of not trying to predict the future, but to try and map productive strategies against the wide range of alternative futures that would help all of us try to manage the huge complexity of this. So anyway, just jumping
Thanks,
in there.
David. So as I said, I think we've had it from the conversations and from the posts. We've got some great ideas on how to structure a bit of a survey across us all, and potentially if we all fill in that survey and we share all of that data, that would help facilitate maybe the ACODE workshop and the structure that Stephen's talking about. So we sort of move forward from today when we get a bit more of data and sharing across this, and open that up into some deeper dives in some areas. So we'll ask everyone if that's of benefit to everyone, or if people think that would be good. We've had incredible attendance today, so I think we've absolutely proven there's the interest there in this topic, and this is just one of our wicked problem areas that we're all trying to seek assistance and what can we learn from one another from. I see Zoe's put up our request there for the forum to keep partaking there. It would be remiss of me to not take the opportunity to also thank Zoe. So as she departs ACODE in this guise, and hopefully we'll be able to introduce our new secretary moving forward. But thanks, Zoe, for everything. I think speaking for everyone, I think we've all really appreciate how fast and how rapidly and what an incredible job you've done in the last year moving us forward.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And I've really appreciated my last 12 months, and I'm still going to be lurking in the background. I'll just be the vet curriculum manager for CQU at the end of the month. I start my new role, but our new SEO will be slotting in behind me within the next week. So I look forward to introducing you all to her.
Thanks, Zoe. And just to wrap up, a final thank you to all, but a reminder, please, if you're your institutional rep, to partake in the special meeting that's coming up as well around the ACODE Constitution. Make sure you have your say, and also it's an absolute appeal because we need to make sure we core it. Constitution changes need a huge amount of us to partake and be there because it's a constitutional change, So please make sure you look at those emails that Zoe's been sending out on behalf of us all to be there. And with that, it's gone 2 o'clock here in Melbourne. Thanks, everyone. Hope that was useful. See you all at the next one.